Place your bets. Might not want to bet that much. Freddy vs. Jason. A film over 2 decades in the making, and a film that, honestly, I have to sadly admit, could have been a lot better. And, but then again, it could also be a lot worse. Influenced by the fans' desire for a crossover film depicting a fight between the two icons, Freddy Krueger and Jason Voorhees, New Line and Paramount tried to make a Freddy vs. Jason movie all the way back in 1987, but the two studios failed to agree on a story or what to do with the two franchises. When Jason Takes Manhattan failed to perform successfully at the box office, Sean Cunningham decided he wanted to reacquire the rights to Friday the 13th and start working with New Line Cinema on Freddy vs. Jason, as New Line owned the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. But the negotiations on the project were never finalized because both companies had a power struggle over what to do with the characters and how much control they had in the making of the film. So the rights reverted to Scuderia Menison and Barrismonto from Paramount, who then sold them the New Line. And before Cunningham could start working on Freddy vs. Jason, Wes Craven returned to New Line to make Wes Craven's New Nightmare. This effectively put Freddy vs. Jason on hold, but allowed Cunningham the chance to bring back Jason into the spotlight with Jason Goes to Hell: The Final Friday. The 9th installment turned a decent profit, although it was intended to open the door for a crossover with Freddy Krueger rather than start a new series for New Line. Ultimately, the film series would go through another sequel before that would end up happening. Cunningham's frustration with the delayed development of Freddy vs. Jason forced him to create another sequel in an effort to keep the franchise in the minds of audiences. Based on Jason Takes Manhattan's concept of taking Jason away from Crystal Lake, the 10th film would put the titular character in space. The film, Jason X, suffered from the loss of its biggest supporter, president of production, Michael DeLuca, when he resigned from his position at New Line Cinema. Lack of support forced the finished film to sit for 2 years before being finally released on April 26, 2002. And then it would go on to become the lowest grossing film in the franchise at the domestic box office, and it also held the distinction of having the largest budget of any of the previous films at that time. And after more than 15 years, almost 2 decades of off and on development and approximately $6 million spent in 18 unused scripts from more than a dozen screenwriters, New Line finally produced Freddy vs. Jason for 2003. One of the biggest hurdles for this film was developing a story that managed to bring the two horror icons together. Potential stories varied widely. Some early scripts had Freddy pee in the Holy Grail, a boxing scene, and a hockey scene. Freddy also gets beamed by a satellite ray into the sun. At one point, Freddy would have had to collect 13 dream demons to collect his powers. Alice, Jacob, and Tommy were to be the main characters. There was also supposed to be a wall constructed around Camp Crystal Lake to keep people out, and other drafts that had the camp being torn down at the end. One unused script by Louis Abernathy featured Jason driving a Subaru. Just imagine this for a second. Actually, I'm gonna give you something. Just look at this. How is this not anything but one of the most ridiculous fucking things you have ever seen? And this script gets better. I mean, technically worse, but you'll see exactly what I mean. Jason drives a Subaru, Jason helps the main characters, and then the final fight between the two, it takes place in a burning mall, with Freddy killing a girl by turning her into a giant lobster and flash steaming her. Then Jason kills a man by shoving a shotgun up his ass. Yep, Jason kills a guy by shoving a shotgun right up his poop chute. a Freddy worshipping cult called the Fredheads, lizard people living in the dream world, making this shit up, Jason being brought back to life with the heart of the final girl's dead boyfriend, also coincidentally named Jason, and Freddy summoning Charles Manson, Ted Bundy, and John Wayne Gacy to aid him in the fight against Jason Voorhees. This script's problems, this script by Louis Abernathy, are immense. They are numerous. It has a multitude of problems. And this was the closest script out of all of these to have gotten the green light. That's scary. That's really fucking terrifying. Because I swear to God, this script sounds like Louis Abernathy was high as balls when he wrote it. And this craziness continues. Because the screenplay's third act has a serious shift in tone, and there were issues of the characters, and then you have the third act, which resembles a later Nightmare on Elm Street picture, in that its horror is traded for cartoonish humor. And because of this, future screenwriters were afraid to approach the material because its premise sounded like a WWE fight, and Abernathy's version is really fueling this fear. And Freddy and Jason have a physical boxing match in hell, officiated by Ted Bundy and attended by Lee Harvey Oswald, Adolf Hitler, Benito Mussolini, and Popeye. Fucking Popeye! And another character battles a giant booger named Booger Man in Freddy's nostril cavern. This is a far cry from the really intense and sick tone in the first act, in which a mentally handicapped 13-year-old girl is kidnapped with the intention of being raped. So that whole script is one of those that I can't even believe. What the fuck? Jason driving a Subaru, a 13-year-old girl getting raped, some guy fighting Freddy in fighting a booger man in Freddy's nostril cavern, a fucking walking, living, talking snot booger, Popeye. Just what the hell? Lizard people? It's fucking insane. And then there are other drafts that are just as stupid and just as mind-blowingly inane. I mean, in several early drafts of the script, two twists were considered that would have connected the past of Freddy Krueger and Jason Voorhees. One considered twist was that Freddy either raped or had a consensual sexual encounter with Jason's mother, and as a result had unknowingly fathered Jason Voorhees. Another twist considered was that Freddy had worked at Camp Crystal Lake in the past and had either molested Jason as a child or was somehow connected to his drowning, being a child murderer and a potential sexual offender, thus giving Jason a motivation to track down and kill Freddy. Both ideas were eventually dropped as the producers felt they were too contrived and too dark for the film, and too stupid. And they completely missed the point of bringing these two together in one film. And also in one early draft of the script, Jason Voorhees had actually been captured and restrained by authorities, and he would spend much of the film on trial for his countless murders. His defense lawyer would have been the lead character. And this is going to be a thing where Jason was this serial killer who took on the guise of Jason, and this is supposed to be, Jason is real, a real guy, and it's not a fake character in a world where Freddy Krueger is real, and it's trying to be like a new Nightmare take on Friday the 13th. It just doesn't work. It's just not appropriate for the film. It's not appropriate for this either, for Freddy versus Jason. So, and there's another ending where Pinhead shows up, and Freddy and Jason are fighting in hell, and Pinhead shows up and he says, "What seems to be the problem, gentlemen?" And then it was supposed to be a setup for Freddy versus Jason versus Pinhead, but of course, New Line didn't have the rights to Pinhead, and the producers also thought he was a low-rent horror icon. Not making that up. That's an actual quote. They thought he was too low rent. Sorry. I think Pinhead is a pretty big horror icon, at least for me. I mean, this is a character who John Carpenter and Clive Barker wanted to do a film together about him. So I don't think he's nearly as low rent as some of the New Line producers thought he was. Either way, they couldn't get the rights, so it wouldn't have happened anyway. But wow, like these ideas, these original script ideas are shocking. They're ridiculous. They're too ambitious, or they just don't work with this particular concept. I don't know why it was so hard to make a Freddy versus Jason movie. And even the film that we got isn't as great as it can be. I think it's a little bit disappointing. And yeah, I definitely have to admit though, like I said earlier, it could definitely be worse. It could be a total shit show like Lewis Abernathy's script. But yeah. Even though I may not personally care for this film that much, it still has its fair share of pros. It still has its fair share of things that work about it. For the most part, when it gets to the versus part, I really like the fights. I think they're a lot of fun. I think they're imaginative. I think they're witty. I think they're very enjoyable, but it takes too long for them to get going. Freddy doesn't even fight Jason until over an hour into the movie. But that being said, I still did like the fights. I can get some enjoyment out of the film just because of the fights between these two heavyweights of horror. I do get a lot of fun out of watching these two fight each other. I also like more than a few lines of dialogue from Freddy. There's some that don't work, but I'll get into that later, but there are some that I did have fun with.
It's not my fault this bitch is dead on her feet.
I think some of the visuals are good, some of the visual effects are there. Others not so much, but there are some that I did definitely like. I like the way the film opened up. I like the bits of gore that we see. I like some of the kills, especially the kill where Jason kills the guy in the bed. I thought that was a good kill. I definitely did, I would say I like bits and pieces of the score. Uh, and the way they handled the story wasn't that bad. I mean, I actually think it opened up really well with the whole thing with Freddy talking about how he no longer has any power, so he ends up bringing back Jason so people can be afraid again, and so he can become powerful again and kill more teenagers and gain power, and because no one's afraid of him anymore. And in order to get people to be afraid, he has to bring Jason back to life. So he uses him as a pawn and a way for him to get more victims, and ends up backfiring. But I think it's still a good idea. I think it's a good plot point. I just don't think the film handled it as well as it could have. But that's for the other section of this review. But yeah, it's not a total loss. It really isn't. Robert Englund does a great job as Freddy. You can tell he's having fun with the role. I liked how they made him a little bit darker. They brought him back to his roots from where he used to be in the first two films of the franchise. They kind of took away a little bit of that MTV style Freddy that was getting a bit old at that time. But I still enjoy that type of Freddy. I do enjoy that Freddy who's spouting one-liners and who's pretty much what he is. He's a funeral director in a way. He's an animated funeral director for all these teenagers. So I do enjoy that Freddy, but I do also really like the dark Freddy that you saw in the first two films and in Wes Craven's New Nightmare. So they try to bring it back here. And there are a few moments where Freddy has fun, and so it's a good blend of the two. Freddy is good, and yeah, I mean that Freddy really Robert Englund is one of the biggest pros that this film has. He's really he really brings it here. He really has a lot of fun with the role, and he definitely is, in a lot of ways, he's the linchpin of this movie. He's the person who's the guy behind everything. Freddy's the guy who's behind everything, and he's the one that's the glue, so to speak, that keeps this film together and keeps this story together. So, and in that respect, Robert does a great job. And the screenplay has its moments as well. There are other moments where it doesn't really hold up as well as it can, as it just doesn't. It has some really bad moments here and there, but I'll talk about that a little bit later. But yeah, the fights are good. I mean, if that's what you came to see the film for, and that's it, then they're good fights. I can't say they aren't. They are. The practical gore effects is pretty good for the most part. There's a decent bit of heavy metal soundtrack music near the end that I like, and there's some good ideas here and there. Some good creepy shots I liked, like the shot with where the Jason Mewes wannabe guy is in the room with all the Elm Street kids who are in comas due to taking too much Hypnosil, and he sees them talking about Freddy, and they all have their eyes covered up, and I just thought it was a really eerie and creepy sequence. I thought it was well shot. It was probably the creepiest sequence out of the entire movie for the most part because it really wasn't that scary. Um, but yeah, that's all I really have for pros, though. It's mainly the fights, it's mainly bits and pieces of the gore, decent bits of the soundtrack, and for Robert Englund, but and a little bit of the one-liners, a little bit of the moments in the film, a few sequences here and there, but that's really about it. The rest of the film, I think, honestly deserves to get drowned in water and lit on fire. Where do I begin with this film's cons, with this film's problems, with this film's multitude of issues and maladies, so to speak? This film to me is, after watching it again, I would probably say it's worse or just as bad as I remember it being. I wasn't really the biggest fan of it when I reviewed this film a long time ago, but I was expecting it to be a lot more fun than it was, and it really wasn't, except for the fights, except for the fight scenes where Freddy and Jason fought each other. The rest of the movie was a pretty miserable bore for me because I don't give a shit about the characters. For the most part, these characters I personally thought sucked. They were terrible. They were unlikable. They were annoying, or they had zero character development and zero depth. And usually a lot of these films don't have tons of character development, but at least these characters have a personality that's likable in some way or another. This film didn't have anybody that I gave a shit about. You had a wannabe Jason Mewes who shows up halfway through the film and gets his ass cut in half, and good riddance. It features a very bland, boring lead actress who's plays our lead, played by Monica Keena, who I thought was just horrendous. She's nice to look at, but all she ever did in this movie was scream her lungs out. I get I get that she's in a horror film. And I get that, oh, hey, horror film actresses they seem to scream a lot. This is just absurd. This is to the nth degree. It was nothing but and then her character takes a complete total shift at the end, and I'm supposed to believe that she's a badass and saying lines like, "Welcome to my world, bitch." And I didn't buy her saying that line. I didn't buy her delivering it one iota because the character was portrayed as such a screaming Mimi throughout the entire movie that the film trying to pull the rug out from underneath me and say she's a badass now, I call bullshit on. I called a lot of bullshit on. This is a bunch of bullshit. Yeah, her character Lori is a very bland, uninteresting character, and she was the lead. This is who we followed for majority of the film. From the beginning of the movie, which started out great with a narration by Robert Englund as Freddy, talking about why he needs to come back and why he brought back Jason. And then we go into Laurie and then her friends, and then her friends suck and nobody's likable. You don't give a shit about anybody. The one guy who's the boyfriend of I think it's Katherine Isabelle. Yeah, that guy gets fucking killed. He gets stabbed because he's a douchebag, and it was good. I'm glad he died early. Jason took care of his ass early killed him with the machete through the back while he was in the bed. And that guy said stupid lines of dialogue, like you said. You know, he's trying to do a jump scare. There's a stupid jump scare moment the film's trying to trick you with, and it's really bad. And he's like, "Oh, I just came in through the back door. I was testing if it worked or some shit." I don't remember what the fuck it was. The line was stupid. The line was so bad that it blew any brain cells that I had that I could use to remember it. And so then we have these characters. You got Katherine Isabelle plays Gib, who's a smoking drunk. She smokes and she drinks and she's obnoxious. And I like Katherine Isabelle from Ginger Snaps. I just wish she had a better character in this film because she has nothing to work with. She dies later in the film in a Jason just stabs her in the stomach, stabs a guy, and then she gets stabbed because of it. And she was in the middle of a dream sequence with Freddy, and Freddy doesn't even get to kill her. And that's another problem I'll get into. So now that's another big con I have with this film. A big issue is how they handle Freddy and how they handle Jason, how they handle both of these characters. But so yeah, Katherine Isabelle dies in a lame way. And of course, then that whole scene after she dies is this stupid scene in a cornfield where Jason shows up and there's this fucking Jack Black wannabe douchebag who's talking shit to Jason. He's like, "Oh hey, Jethro, don't you have a pig to fuck?" And I'm like, where the fuck did this line of dialogue come from? Out of the writer's ass? This doesn't have any context in this sequence. This doesn't make any sense. This doesn't make any sense to insult Jason like he's some fucking hillbilly from Hee Haw. He's a almost 7 foot tall beast with a hockey mask. There's nothing Jethro or fucking hillbilly or redneck about Jason. I don't know where the hell that line came from. It came out of nowhere and it just made me go like, what the fuck? And then Jason kills this one douchebag jock guy, spins his head around, and his head freezes in the stupidest position. Like, it looks really stupid. And then he kills the fat buck with a machete through his chest because he lit him on fire and that didn't work. And then he throws the machete through his chest, which is also on fire, which I didn't mind that shot. But either way, that sequence still sucked because it did. What the fuck? Hey, Jethro, you got a pig to fuck? I don't know where the hell that came from. Makes no sense in the context of this sequence, and no sense when it comes to insulting Jason. If anything, you'd say, "Hey, don't you have a hockey game to go to? Where's the ice rink?" No, no, he's a fucking hillbilly. I guess he's a fucking redneck. Because rednecks wear hockey masks and they're almost 7 feet tall, carrying machetes. I don't fucking know. I really don't. And the lines isn't just bad from the people like this guy fat fucking insulting Jason. It's bad too with Freddy. I mean, Freddy has some good lines here and there, like the one I mentioned earlier. But there's really bad ones like, "Got your nose." I'm like, really? That's the best line you could come up with, writers. "Got your nose." That's shit that you do with a baby. Like, oh, look, hey, baby. Oh, look, a cute little baby. I got your nose. I got it. I got your nose. What the fuck is that? Why, really? That's one of the lamest, shittiest lines of dialogue that I've ever heard Freddy ever say in anything. got your nose. It's bad. Really bad. Like, why? What the fuck were you thinking, writers? Hello? Think, writers, think. And speaking of thinking, writers, I don't know. If you're making Freddy versus Jason, maybe you shouldn't wait over an hour into the movie till they actually fight. Could have had Freddy and Jason fight each other at least, I don't, once before the over hour long mark in a movie that's barely even an hour and a half. That's way too long to wait to see these two fight in a movie called Freddy versus Jason. The film also spends way too much of its running time focusing on these teenagers and these characters that suck. There's no character development for these characters. There's no reason to give a shit about them. So half the time, I just want Freddy and Jason to kill them all. And to be honest, I think that's what should have happened in the first place. I think this movie should have been a body count film. That's all it should have been. It shouldn't have been this typical, boring, cliched, good versus evil and good wins movie. That's really not the direction they should have taken the film. It should have been a body count movie. Just up the ante. Go balls out with the gore. This film felt, honestly, pretty weak. If you think about it, it's got a lot of blood in it and it's got some gore. But the body count is absurdly low for a film that has Freddy and Jason on the screen at the same time. 5 people. 5. If I could count the body count on one hand, that's not a good thing. That's a really bad thing for a movie called Freddy versus Jason. In fact, that's pathetic. That's pathetic if I can count the body count on one hand for Freddy versus Jason. Horror fans like me and slasher fans have been waiting for years for these two to duke it out, to be on the screen at the same time, and they only kill 5 fucking people. Jason kills almost all of them, and Freddy gets 1 kill. 1! That's it. That's insulting. That's a slap in the face to Freddy fans, and a slap in the face to Freddy Krueger, and a slap in the face to Nightmare on Elm Street. And you would think of all companies, New Line wouldn't be doing that, because Nightmare on Elm Street and Freddy Krueger are the reasons why they pretty much still exist to this day. New Line was a house that Freddy built, and he gets a good opening. It feels like it's gonna be more of a homage and a respect to Nightmare on Elm Street and to Freddy, and then it just goes downhill about halfway through the film. Freddy doesn't do dick, kills 1 guy, and then had that shitty Freddy caterpillar scene with the Jason Mewes fucking Jay from Jay from Jay and Silent Bob showing up for some reason in the movie. Why the fuck is he in this movie? Why is there a Jason Mewes wannabe in this movie? Get the fuck out of here. He's a stoner, of course. He gets stoned and he sees Freddy as a caterpillar, and it's an awful CGI effect. It looks terrible. And it looks ludicrous, and it's not scary, and it's just stupid. And then all it does is possess the guy, and then he just pours all the hypnosil out, and then tries to get in a fight with Jason and gets cut in half. Almost really pretty pointless. All it was is a setup so somebody can get rid of the hypnosil that the teenagers are trying to get so they can take, so they don't have to worry about Freddy killing them. And speaking of the whole, the hypnosil stuff, and that was all right. I mean, there's some aspects of the story that weren't bad. I mean, the hypnosil, the idea that Freddy's lost his power because the town of Springwood has taken drastic measures to make sure people don't think about him and don't dream about him, and all of that. Okay, all right, but that can only go so far, because if you have bad characters and the rest of the film, I mean, there's like it feels like 30 minutes where Jason isn't even in the movie, then that's a problem. That's a serious problem. The film also has serious pacing issues because I don't give a shit about these characters that it's trying to shove down my throat. I don't like these characters. I don't care. I don't care about what happens to Monica Keena. I don't care about what happens to Lori, Will, Kia, especially Kia. Kelly Rowland to me was extremely annoying. I could not stand her character for 1 second, and I think the film took way too long killing her off. It waits till like over an hour into the movie, almost before the movie's already over, and Freddy has a chance to kill her. She's insulting Freddy, and it's Jason who kills her. It should have been Freddy who killed her because she's the one that's insulting Freddy and calling him a faggot. I mean, she's calling him a fucking faggot. He should be the one that fucking kills her, not Jason. Yeah, there was a serious Jason bias in this film, especially after the 30-minute mark or whatever. And then it continued until the end, because Jason pretty much wins. He's the good guy. In a lot of ways. He killed Freddy's the villain. And why did we need to do that? Why did it need to be Freddy's bad and Jason's an anti-hero? That's stupid. It should be Freddy and Jason are both evil, or both slashers, or both killers, and they go fucking kill a bunch of teens, and they tag team and kill teens together. That would have been awesome. I would have been fine if this film was just ended with the scene where Freddy looks like, he's going to kill the two teens, and he does it, and then he and Jason go on a killing spree to end the movie in Crystal Lake, or they go back to Elm Street. I mean, that would have been great. That would be a great way to end this movie. That would have been a crowd-pleasing moment, and it would have been surprising. It would have been a shocker. It would have been ballsy. It would have been something that I think would have been awesome to see. I normally don't like those type of endings, but when you have a film like this with these two icons together on the screen at the same time, I think that would have been really cool to see them team up together. I would love to have seen the film throw a curveball at me, and it never did. It was predictable, and it was cliched, and that was just very disappointing to me. With this cliched, good guys win type ending. I mean, even Jason, he saves the day. Freddy's gonna kill him with Jason's machete, and then Jason pops up out of the water like he's Superman and stabs Freddy in the chest with Freddy's own arm. Then he goes back in the water. And speaking of water, it's another dumb thing that this film has. There's another con. For some reason, this film decided that Jason is afraid of fucking water. It's again, writers, think, you buttheads, think. Afraid of water? Did they even I remember hearing the fans of the Friday the 13th films, but did you watch them again before you wrote this screenplay? Because at the end of part 6, he's stuck in water because Tommy throws him in the lake and finds a way to keep him in the lake. He then gets out of the lake in part 7, and then in part 8, Jason takes Manhattan, more like Jason takes Vancouver, and also takes a boat to Vancouver, and by the way, he took a boat, so he's not afraid of water because he was on a boat killing teenagers in part 8 for the majority of the entire movie. He's not afraid of water. He's afraid of drowning, maybe, but he's not afraid of water itself. That was poorly executed by the writers. If you want him to be afraid of drowning, I get it. But with the scene where he's in Freddy's boiler room, and the water pours down, and Jason stands still like a dumbass, and like, whoa, can't go through the water. That just made Jason look like a complete and utter pussy. You don't want Jason to look like a pussy, especially this new, bigger, badass Jason that you replace Kane Hodder with. And that's another problem. This isn't really the Freddy vs. Jason that we had been waiting to see. You have Robert Englund, but you're missing Kane Hodder, who is the actor which pretty much a lot of us Friday the 13th fans associate Jason Voorhees with. He's played the character the most, and I honestly think he does the best job as Jason. He had played Jason in Jason Goes to Hell. He had played Jason in Jason X before this movie. But for some reason, Ronny Yu had a problem. Ronny Yu was like, he's too aggressive. I'm not making this shit up. Ronny Yu had quotes where he said Kane Hodder, his Jason was too aggressive. Too aggressive? I'll show you fucking aggressive, Ronny Yu. You want aggressive, I'll give it to you. What the fucking fuck were you thinking, Ronny Yu? It's too aggressive. Let's recast the guy who made Jason an icon. Yeah, that's a fucking great idea. Let's deprive fans of Freddy and Jason from the battle between Kane Hodder and Robert Englund as these characters that we have been waiting for. Yeah, all because he's too aggressive. Oh, and also Ronny also said he's too short. I want Jason to be some tall guy because I want him to tower over Freddy. I want a David versus Goliath type battle. Oh, and also he's also too aggressive, and he also he doesn't move like slow and methodical like I want Jason to move. What the fuck, Ronny Yu? You turned Jason into the fucking Frankenstein monster. That's what he looked like. He's fucking walking around like he's Frankenstein. No offense to Ken Krizinger. I know he went through a lot in this film. I mean, one shot where he was underwater and he had to come in and out of the lake. And Ronny, you wanted a close up on his eye. He did that all in one take and had to hold his breath, and he burned his eyes because of the chlorine that was in the water, and he got lit on fire in the scene in the cabin where it was on fire. And hey, that's Ken Krizinger. I don't really have a problem with him personally, the man, and personally, I just think he was a shitty Jason. This wasn't Jason Voorhees. It was some guy who's some tall, big guy. It's like they just thought, it's like, hey, it's like, hey, it worked for Sabretooth and X-Men. Let's have Jason be some tall, big motherfucker. And it just didn't work for me. I know he was taller in the remake, Derek Mears, but I thought Derek Mears did a great job. Derek Mears is a much better Jason than Ken Krizinger. Ken Krizinger was the same guy that Kane Hodder threw through a fucking mirror in Part 8. He threw him through a mirror or a window. He threw him through a window. This is the same guy that Kane Hodder threw like he was a fucking bitch in Part 8, and he replaced Kane Hodder. Mainly because Ronny Yu wanted a taller Jason. He wanted a less aggressive Jason Voorhees. He wanted a fucking stilted, walking, dumbass, freaking Frankenstein monster Jason. But, that's a whole nother story. That's one of the biggest cons the film has. Because it's Freddy versus Jason in name only. Because this isn't Jason. Kane Hodder is Jason, just like Robert Englund is Freddy Krueger. It's an epic fuck up. Seriously. So there's that. There's the Freddy losing. Well, he's still alive because of his head winks at the end. That doesn't count. He's nothing. There's nothing left but his head. He's dead. Freddy is dead. He doesn't regenerate his body. Jason pretty much won. And whatever happened to the triple ending that Ronny Yu was talking about? Oh, he said, I never really meant that. But you said it in an interview before. I mean, you should have went with that. Have alternate endings. One where Freddy wins for Freddy fans, and one where Jason wins for Jason fans, and the one where none of them win. But no, all we get is just Jason winning. And then there's another ending that sucked even more, though, the original ending, where all of a sudden Will becomes Freddy and kills somebody. And I'm like, what the hell is that? I think he kills Laurie or something at the end. Like, that was a shitty twist ending. Like, that didn't work either. But this wasn't much better. Because it pretty much was just like Jason wins. At least that's how I interpreted it anyway. And then you have bad lines of dialogue. You have pathetic, shitty, crappy characters. You have really Freddy doesn't get to do that much. He just gets nothing but one kill in the entire movie. The body count is too low. It's got blood and gore, but it doesn't feel like there's a heart behind it. It doesn't feel like there's any passion behind this film. It feels like it's a cash grab. It looks like it too, and that's really too bad. I really think it should have been a love letter to the fans, and it really doesn't feel like a love letter to the fans to me, especially not Freddy fans. He kills one person, he steals one teen, and he pretty much loses at the end of the movie, and he's the villain, he's the bad guy. It could have been worse. I know we could have had Jason driving a fucking Subaru and shoving shotguns up people's asses, and Freddy dealing with a bunch of Fredhead cult members, and there's lizard people and all kinds of crazy shit. But that doesn't excuse this film sucking as much as it does at points. And it sucks. I hate to admit it, but it does. It has shitty characters, which really hurt the film a lot for me, because I don't care about what happens to them, so I want them all to die, so it really hurts the pacing of the film. Speaking of pacing, and speaking of editing, this film has some really bad editing at points. You have when Freddy and Jason first fight in the cabin, they get in the fight, it starts, you've been waiting for it, it cuts away from it before it kills the momentum. It cuts away from the beginning of the fight to see Jason Ritter, or I think it might be Jason Ritter, or I don't think it's Jason Ritter, it's some other guy. It's Kyle Labine who plays Freeberg, and he dies on a tree. And then Freddy shows up, and then you have that then Kelly Rowland smack talks him and gets killed by Jason. And then the fight starts up again. What the hell? You killed the momentum of the fight. You don't start a fight, then cut away from it just to see some character I don't give a fuck about die. I don't care what happened to Freeberg. I don't give a shit. I want to see the fight. It's like if you watched a boxing match and the fighters are fighting and it's really starting to get good, and then the camera turns away and shows somebody in the audience doing something and then goes back to the fight and you missed. I'm like, what? You don't do that. So, but that's just me personally. I just thought it was a bad edit. I thought it was a really bad edit. And then there's some, like I said, there's some bad effects, the CGI Freddy Caterpillar, some bad CGI blood at moments. I didn't care for the lighting that Ronny Yu chose to use, like the red lighting and the green lighting and red light, green light. I didn't care for that. I really didn't. Didn't add to the atmosphere of the film either. Didn't care for the filtering and any of that stuff. It really didn't. The film looked too dark at points. You barely see shit. So yeah, I don't care for the tone of the film. It's too humorous for my taste. It needed to be a little bit more serious at times. At least try to scare you. It didn't even try to do that. And if it was just going to be a humorous, fun movie, then it should have been more fun than it was. It should have had more fun with its characters. It should have had more sequences with Freddy killing kids in their dreams or doing something. It should have had more kids, more teenagers. It had a bigger body count. That's the big thing. A big body count. That's what this film should have had. It's Freddy versus Jason. There's no excuses for this to have body count this low. So yeah, I really don't know what to say about in terms of cons about this movie. I really don't, except yeah, there's a lot of them. For the most part, they outweigh the pros. If it wasn't for the fun Freddy fights, this would be a complete and utter total waste. And I hate to say that, but I am. I think this is just marginally better than Nightmare 5, The Dream Child. I don't know which one I'd rather watch. I would have rather watch this or Jason Takes Manhattan. They both suck. So I honestly would say I like Jason Goes to Hell more than this. I definitely would say that. I think that's a much better film, but that's just me personally. But yeah, I know we're rambling in this con section, but this is basically the rant section of the video, and yeah, Freddy versus Jason, disappointing in a lot of aspects in the script and the way they handle Freddy and Jason, and the characters, and the body count, the gore, and yeah, um, but that's just me personally. So yeah, I really don't know what else to say about Freddy versus Jason, except it's not a film I hate. I did rant on it for a good amount of time in my cons section of this review, but that's because I really feel there are a lot of problems that this film has. There's a lot of issues that I personally have with this movie, and I just think it should have been and could have been a lot better than it is. It's got some good fights, some good gore, and some decent lines here and there, some decently creepy sequences, not very many of them, but the problem I have with it is unlikable, annoying characters, pacing issues, not enough kills, very low body count, and yeah, and it doesn't have Kane Hodder as Jason, and Krizinger is a shitty replacement. So, yeah, Robert did good though. He's another pro. Robert Englund was great as usual. I mean, there's only one Freddy Krueger, and it's Robert Englund, and he does a great job as playing the character as always. And I have fun with the film in a lot of ways because of Robert Englund, and I do enjoy the fights, but that's it. And if I want to watch the fights, I'll just watch them separately because the rest of the movie to me just sucks. It really does. The rest of the movie, for the most part, is lame and forgettable with C below CW level actors, and it just isn't as epic as it should have been. This should have been like the end all be all when it comes to slasher films. This should have been the biggest, baddest slasher movie ever, and it really wasn't. It just, other than the fights, that's it. That's it. The fights were the only thing that were really that great about the movie. And I guess there's a plane flying overhead to solidify the message, I guess. But yeah, I guess I live near a fucking airport all of a sudden. But anyway, yeah, I wrap this up. Freddy versus Jason. It's a entertaining movie at points, and it deals with the fights and some sequences with Freddy and some lines and so forth. But and the idea itself, the way they handled it, could have been better, but it could have been worse. But at the same time, I don't care for this movie. I don't hate it, but I definitely don't like it either. And I honestly think it's a step below mediocre because of the fact that I think its cons definitely outweigh its pros. So yeah, I definitely would call this a disappointing movie in a lot of ways. But hey, it's cool if anybody else loves it and finds it a very enjoyable, fun movie and they love it to death. I have no problem with that, but I'm not one of those people. But anyway, really don't know what else to say. It's a rate out of 5 stars, 2.5 out of 5. Like I said, it's a disappointing movie. It's a film that I'm glad they made it so I could see the two face off, but at the same time, I really do feel it could have been a lot better. But then again, at least it was not as bad as this.